Haruko Watanabe, HKW Media Report. I'd like to ask you some basic question. What took you so long to come to Tokyo to present your own principle speech and observation and research? Because it's kind of too late. It's in Olympic, it's coming in 1 year. How can you organize or how can you stimulate anti-Olympic movement and organization if you come too late? It's too late to boycott the Olympic Games, Professor Boykov.
Thank you.
Thank you for, I'm expecting to have a clear-cut answer from all of you.
Yeah, I can start. So, as I mentioned in our statement, one issue in LA is that the bidding process has largely been kept under wraps. So it had been very difficult to get information for a long time. I count myself among the many Angelenos who had no idea that Los Angeles was bidding. I think unlike in other cities or in past Olympics where the Olympics and the bidding process has been sold to the city and heavily advertised and propagandized, in LA it's been kept under wraps. And most people don't know that it's happening. So when we first started talking about it, it was very, low rumbles. And when we started organizing, as many of you may remember, the process that happened for the LA bid was relatively unusual, where LA and Paris were both bidding, the last two cities bidding for 2024. And the timeline, it happened very quickly, where the IOC made the announcement that they were going to let both cities choose who would take 2024 and who would take 2028. And that happened, I believe, on July 31st, 2017. And then the LA City Council voted 11 days later. So there was a very, very quick turnaround and no time for public input. It was not something that was really shared with the public. These were all decisions and conversations that happened behind closed doors and then were just presented as inevitable. So we've been organizing as quickly as we can. The conversations about coming here to Tokyo started, I believe, about 6 months ago. And then since then, we've been working almost around the clock to raise funds and to organize with the incredible help and skill of Misako-san and the rest of Hunger no Kai and Okatawa Link and other groups in Tokyo. But yeah, it's been a huge effort. And I think I would also just want to add, as Misako was mentioning, this is not just about stopping one Olympics. This is about stopping all of the Olympics and working together. And that's something we believe that we can do from where we're sitting right now and in an ongoing way.
Thank you for your question. And I think it's a good one. I have, as I say, been working on this for quite a long time, and I'm not alone. There are other researchers and writers in the room who've been thinking critically about the Olympics. So I would say, first of all, there's been a lot of information out there, and the evidence tends to point in the same direction, the trends that I pointed out earlier. I would have loved to have come here earlier, absolutely. I'm not sure I necessarily needed to because there's so much information in the public sphere. And in fact, if you just stick to Japan for a moment, I know I was picking on my own country, the United States, a minute ago, but the 1964 Olympics in Tokyo went way over budget. You see some of the trends that I discussed even back in 1964. I picked on Salt Lake City, but 1998 Nagano Games, we don't really know the specifics on what happened there because the documents were shredded from those games. But we suspect that some of the very same corruption that I described in regards to Salt Lake City was going on with Nagano as well. So I think if we look around with a critical eye, we can find evidence of all this. But I think what really the bottom line of your question is, it points up, is that we are right now in the midst of a historic and unique moment. I've been studying anti-Olympics activism for a long time, and this is the first time that I've seen activists come together from around the world to create a transnational summit. Whether it should have happened a few years ago, sounds like that's what you think, and I think there's a lot of people that would agree with you, but it's definitely happening now in Tokyo, and it's happening here this week.
私たち、ハンゴリーの会は2013年の招致段階から活動しています。
So our group, No Olympics Committee, is active from September 2013 when the sort of invitation thing was decided.
オリンピックが決定してしまったら、各地で排除、搾取、とんでもないことが東京で起こるというふうには、たやすく想像できました。
When the Olympics were decided to be held in Tokyo, I already could foresee that the number of eviction would happen, not just in Tokyo but everywhere in Japan.
なぜならば、それまでもたくさんの、オリンピック各、開催都市で同じようなことが起こっているからです。
The reason is that the same kind of thing have been happening every place where Olympics have been held.
日本の中でも、64年の東京オリンピック、そして、長野、その前に、72年の札幌、とものすごい破壊が行われました。
In 1964 Tokyo Olympics and 72 Sapporo Winter Olympics and 1998 Nagano Olympics, in all of these places, huge destructions were made.
私たちはもう知っているんです。オリンピックがものすごい破壊の、装置であること。
We already know that the Olympics is the machine that destroys everything.
2013年9月、東京に決定したとき、みんなとってもショックでした。
In 2013 September, when the Olympics will be held in Tokyo and it was decided, we were really shocked.
ただそこから始まったのは、もう決まったことだから仕方がないという諦め、そしてそのまま、破壊がどんどん進んでいくという状況でした。
But the same thing, the simultaneously, what happened is that the sense of resignation, that we cannot resist anything.
しかし、諦めるわけにはいかないんです。すでにもうたくさんの人たちの生活が奪われて、今も奪われ続けているから、何度でも1年前だろうか1日前だろうか始まってからでも、それ以後も世界中で同じようなことが起こっている以上、私たちは黙るわけにはいかないです。
We cannot renounce our hope since the evictions and sort of destructions are already happening. And even if the games are started, we have to continue resisting.
オリンピックは今、招致したいという都市はどんどんと減っています。
Less and less cities are trying not to invite the future Olympics.
住民投票をした都市では確実にオリンピックを招致しないと決めました。
When the biddings are happening in those cities, they decided not to invite Olympics.
オリンピックはもういらないです。みんな住民はいらないと考えているんです。
The people no longer want Olympics.
これからも私たちは1年前でもずっとオリンピックが終わってからも多分声を上げていくでしょう。
Even if just 1 year before the Tokyo Olympics, we will raise our voice, and even during the Olympics, we will have our own voices.
ありがとうございました。
Thank you. Next question. Yes. Go ahead.
Hi, Dave Zirin from The Nation magazine in the United States. You've given a lot of compelling reasons why people should be very suspicious of the Olympic Games. Why do people like Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and Casey Wasserman, for example, Mayor Eric Garcetti, why do they want the Olympic Games? I mean, if it's so clear that they cause debt, displacement, and militarization, why to them are these important social investments in their cities?
Thank you for that question. I think the place to start to answer that is to look carefully at who is bidding, who's creating the bids for the Olympics, and who within the political system is supporting those bids. And of course, that tends to be the political and economic elites of each and every Olympic bid city. You don't see homeless folks coming together in prospective Olympics cities and saying, let's bid on the Olympics, this is really going to help us. You don't see poor and working folks getting together and saying, let's bid on the Olympics, this is going to help us. What you see is, because of all that money sloshing through the system, you see people who are well-connected political and economic elites who feel like this is an excellent business opportunity. And so they put their minds together and they put their bids together and they put them forth and they try to put the shiniest shine on them as they can. And so you've seen this in city after city after city. Because let's not make any mistake, despite those trends that I pointed out before, there are opportunities, if you will, for the Olympics. Not opportunities for everyday people, mind you, but opportunities for those who are well connected to make even more money. So I think if we walk at that question thinking about who are the political elites in the city, who are the well-connected economic and corporate elites in a city, that gets us well on the road to understanding why, despite this mountain of evidence that has been created over time by diligent and neutral social scientists, we still see bids even today.
Thanks. Yeah.
Can I answer as well? Yeah. I think just to echo what Jules was saying, this is a question that has come up for us a lot, and keeping in mind that people like Casey Wasserman and Eric Garcetti are two of the most privileged, powerful, wealthy people, and similar to everyone who is involved in LA's bid in particular, it was folks like Bob Iger, who's the CEO of Disney, Gene Sykes of Goldman Sachs. These are some of the wealthiest and most powerful people on the planet. So they are essentially insulated from any of the effects that we're talking about. They will profit and make money and benefit from the Olympics, even if it, millions of people lose their homes, even if the city, goes bankrupt, they will not only be fine, but they will benefit. It's a question that's come up for us in response to the myth that the LA 84 games were profitable for LA. The truth is that the LA 84 games had a small surplus, and so when people have asked us, well, didn't those games make money? Our response is always, yes, but for who? Not for the residents of the city. Not a penny of that money went back to the city of LA. It all went into a private foundation called the LA 84 Foundation that was started, and for the first, I forget how many years, but for the first several years was managed by Casey Wasserman's wife's grandfather. So this is all an opportunity to keep money and resources and power within a small group of people and sort of to continue to widen that gap that I mentioned earlier. The fact that LA has 60 billionaires and 60,000 homeless people. The Olympics serves to further divert all of those resources, all of that wealth. Any benefit that would come in for the games would go towards a small group of people and harm a much larger group.
2013年の9月の安倍首相のスピーチから分かるようにいろいろなことをオリンピックは覆い隠すことができるそのような政治プロジェクトだからだと思います。
So, as we can see from Prime Minister Abe's speech in September 2013, the Olympics can cover up many kinds of things.
まるで平和の祭典、そのように銘打って、実際現地ではものすごい破壊が、あらゆる破壊、監視、暴力が行われています。
So, on the surface, it seems a peaceful celebration, whereas behind the scenes, there are many devastations and evictions.
先ほどボイコさんが言ってくださったように、グリーンウォッシュ、なども言われていますが、まさに、オリンピックウォッシング、そのようにも言えるんじゃないでしょうか。
So, Mr. Baikov said before that greenwashing is going around anywhere when where Olympics will be held. But the same thing can be said in 2020 Tokyo.
この準備段階であらゆる破壊と、住民の、コントロール、行い、今まで民主的な手続きでやってきたこともすべてオリンピックのため、期限が切れてデッドラインが決まっているその日に合わせるために、ブルドーザーのごとくすべてを民主的な手続きをすっ飛ばして物事を進めている今状況です。
So what we see now is the politicians bulldozing the democratic procedures we should have.
それを1年後の開会式、きっと安倍首相は華やかにこのオリンピックを開催するでしょう。
After 1 year, the Prime Minister Abe will declare a happy and peaceful opening of the Olympics.
そしてたくさんのアスリートたちが活躍し、皆さんに感動を与えるのです。
A great number of athletes will come here and give sort of moving moments to the audience around the world.
そしてまた華やかに栄光を与えます。
And proper sort of glory is in everyone's eyes.
これが終わって、感動で終わる。それで、オリンピックウォッシングの出来上がりです。
So what I mean by Olympic washing is periodized by this kind of moving moments.
この政治を、各都市、まさに民主的な、民主主義、そういったものが崩れていく、そういった危機感のある状況が、今各都市で行っているというふうに考えています。
What I think is that democracy we have and we've constructed have been deteriorated by these big events.
ありがとうございます。
Thank you so much.
Thanks. If I may ask a question, please take the other side of the way. Yes, you mentioned all of these negatives, but we have to admit that the Olympics has many positives. It's good status for the country, usually, and it promotes the sports. We have many ideals. The kids want to be like, this sport guy and this sport lady, and they want to improve their, level. And also the Olympics unified the nations, all come to one city and become as one family. That's really good feeling. We cannot deny that. And also Olympics, yes, it's good for business, but what's wrong? Business needs business, Olympics or anything else usually. And also Olympics is good opportunities for us, for journalists. Now the media is having really hard times, and we are happy we can do some, extra business in Tokyo. And also Olympics, they say it stimulates the economy somehow. That's the pro-Olympics people say that. So instead of you want to scrap the Olympics, why don't you call for reform the Olympics and clean up the Olympics from all these, bad and corruption things, and that's more realistic than scrubbing at all the Olympics. I think the world needs some good events instead of wars. We need some sports. We need some, activists that we watch it and we enjoy it. So I think it's more realistic if you find a little bit better course for that. Thank you. Sorry for long.
そうですね。とてもエキサイティングするスポーツ観戦は、みんなをすごく楽しめることでしょう。
So to watch sports games are really exciting.
その時に、国同士で戦う必要はないと思います。
But the thing is that we do not have to fight among the nations.
街の中にやはり小さな、スポーツや、本当に小さな、知ってる人たちの中で、スポーツ観戦もしていることでも、楽しめるんじゃないかなと私は思いますし。
we have city-run facilities where people can enjoy the sports, and a physical sort of enjoyment is everywhere.
でやっぱりこのとても興奮する、とてもワクワクするというものが、人々の競争や、そういったもので、感動したりとかすること、そういった欲望自体を、大きな力にコントロールされるということが私たちちょっと怖いと思っています。
So what we fear is to be controlled, for them to control our desire to enjoy and to excite and to have moving moments from the sports.
そこのコントロールに、非常に政治的な、意図があるということをオリンピックは示しているので、本当に、そこを知ってほしい、負の側面、たくさんあるということを取材して胸が痛いようなこともたくさんあることもぜひ皆さん、取材してほしいです。
So what we see is the intermingling moment of controlling and being controlled. But among these intermingling sort of moments, we also have pains somewhere behind the scenes.
I've got a long one. Go ahead. Okay. Yeah, I'll just say in advance, I have sort of a long response. That was a can of worms. So I guess there's a couple of things to respond to in that. I guess first and foremost, I don't think we have to admit that the Olympics have positive benefits. And then to respond to a few of those specific claims, starting with one, this idea that it's exciting for children who look up to athletes. That's something we hear a lot in LA. People kind of using the youth as a way of kind of selling the Olympics and selling this positive, shiny image. And I think it's important to understand the actual reality that a lot of children are facing in LA. A lot of the children in my neighborhood, in my community, my neighbors, I live in an apartment building in Boyle Heights, which is a predominantly working class, immigrant, Latinx community in LA. Those children don't want to lose their homes. They don't want their parents to be deported. They're not excited about the Olympics. I guarantee you that they would choose being able to stay in their homes and being able to live with their families and not living under constant threat of displacement, whether it's in the form of being deported or evicted, than they would the opportunity to maybe see an athlete. And recognizing too that those children will never have a chance to see the Olympic Games. The Olympic Games are not for them. They will not be invited. Their families can't afford tickets. So it's not, the games are not good for the children. I'll just say that. Also keeping in mind, speaking of the athletes, and the athletes are incredibly exploited. We would count the athletes among the many victims of the Olympic Games, looking at the number of sexual abuse scandals, including the huge one most recently in the US of Larry Nassar, and the US Olympic Committee and Michigan State University, which covered up his massive, monstrous violent abuse of women for however many years. This idea of the Olympics are good because the athletes are good role models for children, I think on both ends of the spectrum is a false premise. The other thing I wanted to address is the idea of, why are we saying no and not asking for reform, and the claim that reform is more realistic. What we've seen from history and from working and talking to other organizers in other cities is that reform has consistently failed. There have been many anti-Olympics groups that have tried to negotiate, that have asked for a reform, that have been told that they're going to get reform, and then reform doesn't happen. And it makes sense, right? Because the IOC, the local politicians, the business interests, I will agree with the one point that you made that this is good business for media. Jules mentioned the other night in his symposium that, NBC made a record profit for the Rio Games while Rio was devastated. So yes, it is good for media and for corporate sponsors. Those are the businesses. It's not local businesses that benefit, to keep in mind. There were a number of businesses that went bankrupt in LA after the LA 84 Games and sued the LA Organizing Committee and won for $40 million. That's something I believe we saw in Pyeongchang as well, that local businesses went bankrupt. But keeping in mind, so the people who are driving this have no incentive to reform, and all of the things that we're mentioning, displacement, militarization, environmental degradation, these are not side effects. These are the plan. That's the intention. So they cannot be negotiated away because that's the purpose. It's not a trade-off. So you can't, that is why they are doing it. So once again, we've seen that reform has failed everywhere that it's been tried, and what has worked in many cities, in an increasing number of cities, is rejection, is people coming together and saying no. So actually, to us, saying no is the most realistic plan, because that's the only thing that's worked.
Thank you. I appreciate you setting a lot of those ideas on the table for us to take a look at, because I think you teed up a lot of things that flit through the discussion in the media and elsewhere, and we should take a hard look at them. In fact, you actually teed up some things that are some of the biggest myths around the Olympics, to be honest. One of the things we hear a lot is that if you host the Olympics, you can become a world-class city, have the world's attention on you. But if you look back at some of the recent hosts, I mean, who hasn't heard of Tokyo? Who hasn't heard of Los Angeles? Who hasn't heard of London? Go down the line here. These are already world-class cities. They certainly don't need the Olympics to burnish their reputations. The idea of unifying different countries, I think you could make an argument for that within the athlete village, which I understand are veritable rabbit hutches with all the condoms that they leave for the athletes. That's about as close as we get to unifying the nation. I mean, if we look at some of the actual sports battles and certainly how it's portrayed in the press and among the fans, it's really more that the Olympics traffic in a sort of plastic nationalism that rears its head during the Olympic Games. If we're talking about really the question of for whom do the Olympics boom, you're right. It's for the media. You're right. It's for corporations. And Ms. Ortier is right as well, is that a lot of times local companies get boxed out. I've watched this in Olympics after Olympics. To get people on board in the beginning, we're told that small companies, local companies are going to have a heyday. They're going to make lots of money. You saw it in Los Angeles, 1984. The local companies were kept outside the fence. I mentioned before that I lived in London in 2012, where I interviewed numerous small business owners that were told this was going to be your big chance. Some of them actually went into debt to expand their businesses, only to have nothing of the sort happen with the Olympics and the Olympic tourists. People that study Olympic tourism find that it's a very specific type of tourist. And so they go to specific Olympic events, they stay within the Olympic fences, and they don't go out and visit the locals who are outside the fences because they're not Olympic sponsors. And so oftentimes what happens is the small companies actually get hurt. In fact, one of the people I interviewed who expanded his business, I returned a couple of years later to see how everything was going. He was out of business. He was one metro stop away from the Olympics and told this was going to be his big moneymaker. It was the exact opposite. I should also mention that the corporations who are the sponsors of the Olympics, when they helicopter in for the games, they get tax breaks. And if they make money, and there is evidence that corporations do make money off the Olympics and Olympic sponsors have a pole position for that, that money tends to leak out of the local economy and back to the corporate headquarters. And so again, it's not like the local economy is going to benefit from this. It's going to be a short-term infusion of money into a small political and geographical space. So I think in terms of the feel-good factor that you alluded to, it can be real, not for everybody. It can be real for certain, let's be honest, classes of people who have the privilege to enjoy it. I happen to be of those classes. So when I lived in London, I got to ride the subway and see people with their flags and their uniforms and people talking. And there's definitely, it felt good. It wasn't like London usually where we're all looking down at our mobile phones or reading the newspaper. But again, it's fleeting. And who wins from that? A certain group of people, and it's a very classed group of people. Finally, on the notion of reform, there's lots of things that the Olympics could certainly do to reform, and I have many ideas for that, notwithstanding Ms. Ortier's important point that hasn't got a lot of traction, some of these pleas for reform in the past. But if you really want to get serious about Olympic reform, you could just simply focus on the Olympic Village for a second. Because in Olympics after Olympics after Olympics, we're told that the Olympic Village is going to be this space for everyday people to live after the Olympics. Not Rio, where it was going to be a space exclusively for the rich, we were told from the outset. At least there was a little bit of truth to that. In Vancouver and London, on the other hand, we were told there was going to be a social housing component, when in reality, once money got tight, and in the case of Vancouver, the private company that was running and making the Olympic Village went belly up. It went out of business, and the federal government had to step in, and the Vancouver government had to step in and basically nationalize the project. We've seen time and again big promises, but again, the follow-through is lacking. And then once that happens and the government comes in, also happened in London, then they're like, well, look, we can't have social housing. We need to make our money back. We weren't even expecting to put all this money into this Olympic Village project. So if one were serious, and I doubt with a lot of people that they're serious about reforming the games to help everyday people, if they were, they could start with the Olympic Village and talk about how to make it into an equitable space after the Olympic Games. That's just one tiny, tiny sliver of what we're talking about, but would be a chance for people who are serious about reform to show just a shred of goodwill.
Thank you. I would like to make an announcement. There was audio problem on our live streaming service. We broadcast this event through live streaming internet, so we had audio problem. There's no audio. I would like to apologize on behalf of Press Club for this inconvenience. It has caused some people who were watching us. We are sorry about that. Thank you. I think we reached the time, but I would like to allow very small question. If any of you have a short question, we can give. Yes? Yeah.
Hi, Spike Friedman, Pace Magazine. My question is, with media, how have you seen the media cover these events in these bidding processes in the past? And what do you see, especially given the conflicts of interest you were talking about in terms of media growth, the potential future for media involvement in the Olympic process? What would you like to see in that regard?
Okay, I guess I can start while so yeah, I guess just to recap the question a little bit, what has media coverage of the process looked like, and what would we like to see in the future? Is that right? Okay, thanks. So yeah, media coverage, and I guess to back up a little bit, the media landscape in Los Angeles is very interesting right now. It's a very interesting time. We have, for one of the biggest cities in the world, we have one newspaper in Los Angeles. There's one newspaper. We have one newspaper, 2 public radio stations, and then a few independent outlets. And one of the things that we've seen happening over the last few years is as the media, a journalistic business model is struggling. A lot of real estate investors and speculators, the same interests that are invested in bringing the Olympics to LA, have bought these outlets and have financial stakes in these media outlets as well. And that, as you can imagine, impacts coverage. So, for example, the new owner of the Los Angeles Times, our one paper for our giant city, owns a number of sports stadiums and has investments in sports media companies. And so, that is something that we think in our group has affected the coverage. We think it should be something that's made public, that the paper should acknowledge when they're writing about it. For example, some of the people who are being displaced right now by rising rents and gentrification live in Inglewood, which is a city in the county of Los Angeles, and they're building a giant new stadium there, and folks are being driven out in droves as we speak. And the way that the LA Times covers this is to basically a lot of times list a lot of these myths and talk about how good this stadium is for the local economy, and fails to mention that the owner of the paper has a financial interest in this stadium. We also see this, there's another outlet Curbed is a national website and publication, but the company that owns Curbed, Casey Wasserman, who we've mentioned, the chair of LA 2028, he's on the board. And so, that's something have friends who worked for Curb. A number of people in our group are journalists. Curb primarily covers real estate. So, for example, they were covering the sale of Casey Wasserman's house because it was such a historic, huge figure that he was selling it for. And some of them off the record mentioned to us that it was a very strange process having to write about the political implications of, somebody's wealth who is effectively has control over whether or not you as a journalist get fired or keep your job. And so that's something we've been seeing in an ongoing way, these kind of massive conflicts of interest. The LA Times has sponsored events that the LA 84 Foundation has hosted. We've asked them about this. They sort of often have these like backdoor reasons that it's okay and it's not a conflict of interest. But again, we see the results play out and how things are covered. So I think in terms of what we would like to see, primarily we would just like an independent media that is not owned by real estate investors, and to allow journalists to basically actually report on what's happening. We would like to see the people who are being affected in every way be at the center of these stories. And be allowed to tell their own stories. I think one of the things that's most personally distressing to me is when, and this is something I've seen everywhere, not just in LA, is when the media tends to report on the devastation of the Olympics or the devastations of gentrification. Even when the stories are ostensibly sympathetic, they still sort of position the people being affected as victims and not focus on the organizing work. I think that's something we're hearing from the folks who went to Fukushima yesterday. I had no idea that people in Fukushima were resisting and organizing. That's not a story that the media covers. So I think, again, changing who is a subject and who has agency in these stories is really important. Being hyper aware and honest about conflicts of interest and economic interests in terms of how things are reported is really important. And that extends beyond the Olympics. That extends to pretty much every issue that affects our lives and communities.
そうですね、招致段階からなかなか、オリンピック、の問題というよりは、ちょうど2013年は、私たち、日本でのスポーツの中における暴力問題が浮上した時でした。
So 2013 was the year when the issue of violence was raised in the sports world.
柔道女子のナショナルチーム、が、全くひどい暴力を受けてきたと、勇気ある告発をして、日本におけるスポーツ界の、暴力体質が明るみに出たと思います。
So it means that a female national team of judo exposed courageously what they have been done by the coaches and the committees.
そういった状態でオリンピックを招致するとは、私たち自身、思わなかったと思います。
So because of that, we didn't expect that Japan will really invite the future Olympics.
そういったやっぱり大きな力で、ぐいっと招致を獲得してしまう、住民たちの気持ちを無視して、獲得してしまう力が、あるので、やっぱり報道の力、すごく、住民たちが持っている、感情気持ち、は報道関係ジャーナリストたちが積極的に、取り上げないと表に出てこないというのがあります。
So of course, media coverage has huge power to the minds of the people, because when the Olympics were decided, people's attention were sort of directed just to that. So it means that they have to cover everything behind the scenes.
ローカルな市民メディアもすごく頑張って、本当の声をすくい上げようとしているので、私たちはその人たちとも連携しつつ、大手のメディアとも、ぜひとも報道してほしいと思っています。
Meanwhile, the independent local medias are really cooperative for us, and they cover what is happening behind the scenes. But we also hope that big media companies will also broadcast and cover what is happening behind the scenes as well.
Thank you. Do you have anything?
Just real quick, I mean, at the risk of sounding obsequious, I would say that the media, which is to say journalists, are a key linchpin in how the Olympic juggernaut rolls forward or doesn't. And the media coverage of the Olympics has changed pretty drastically over time. There's a lot of critical coverage these days, especially when the Olympic Games are down the road. What I'll be keeping a close eye on as we move forward is how media, especially local media here in Japan and in Tokyo in particular, cover the Olympics the closer they get. Do we see space for being critical now, but it evaporates as the games get closer, even though the issues don't evaporate? That has been a trend in the past, and that's something that I'll be keeping an eye on as we move forward.
Thanks. I would like to allow another last question. Short, very short one. Thank you.
Joseph, my name is Haruna Honkop from the Czech Republic, filmmaker. I would like to follow up the question on reform. Although it seems to all of you that it's not possible to reform the Olympics, but how about if the Olympics came to its origins, meaning they would be held at one place? Or if you can comment very quick, like how the mobility of the Olympic Games is influencing the whole movement. Thank you.
So I think the subtext of the question is maybe having the Olympics return to Athens, return to Greece potentially. People have mentioned that as one option. It's not clear that the people of Athens really want the Olympics at this point, given what happened last time in 2004. We still see stadiums overcome with weeds today from those 2004 Olympics, despite the grand promises. I think the idea of a rotating city Olympics has a little bit more traction these days. So you have a handful of 4 or 5 cities for the Winter Olympics, 4 or 5 cities for the Summer Olympics, and you just rotate and you have it move around the globe. That sounds okay in the abstract, but when you start thinking about it in the specific, it doesn't necessarily hold up, especially now that you think about new stadiums that are built are only new for so long. I come to you from the United States, where in Atlanta, they made a brand new stadium for the 1996 Olympics. They rubbled it, which is to say they demolished it 20 years later. And so by the time the games would have rotated back around to Atlanta, they would have needed a stadium anyway. So it doesn't really get at some of the dynamics that we've been talking about in terms of building, in terms of demolition, in terms of getting rid of particular communities. So it's definitely a conversation that should be had, and probably that's a step in the right direction. But it doesn't necessarily solve the problems in a direct way as one might seem just on the surface.
Thank you very much. Just clarification. How many members are in your group? Do you have a number? Like 50,000, 10,000?
デモでは100人、200人集まることもあります。
We have hundreds or to hundreds of people in street demonstration.
でももう反対してる人は多分住民の人はすごく多いと思います。もううんざりだと思ってる人はもうほとんどだと思います。
But the people who are living the people living in Tokyo, they are really, really against the Olympic itself.
All right, thank you very much for your insights. We enjoyed your talk, and we would like to thank everybody for coming today, and please give our speakers special applause for their presentation. Thank you very much.